Have you ever had an ex that you truly regretted? I think most of us can relate, but what about one who was so evil that he returned from the grave to make your life miserable? Keep listening to hear a true story from one of my own paranormal investigations. Welcome to the Peep Podcast. I'm your host, Nicolle, and on this episode, you'll hear a story from my nonfiction book, Please Don't Call Me Psychic, Stories from My Paranormal Life. The book is available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle, or you can request it from your favorite bookstore. They may not want to, but they can order it from Amazon through its distribution platform. And by the end of January, it will be available from non-Amazon distributors too. Before we get into the story, I have a few quick announcements. Congratulations to Jessica for winning my November book giveaway. I emailed you on December 1st, but I haven't heard back yet. If you're listening, please check your spam folder. I need your mailing address to send those books to you. This will be the last episode of 2023. I'll be back in January, though, so don't delete me. Lining up podcast guests is always a challenge this time of year, and this December my calendar is proving to be much more jam-packed than it has been in a long time. So I'm going to take a little break from the podcast. This is episode 76, so if you haven't listened to all the previous episodes, now is a great time to catch up. Okay, now back to tonight's ghost story, which was chosen by voters on Twitter and Facebook. When people ask how I know whether I am dealing with an evil entity or a good one, my answer is simple. The two feel differently. On one of the rare occasions that I have investigated a home with an evil being, which was presumably a human spirit, the room where I felt his energy most gave me an instant, sharp, and horrible headache within seconds of entering. It truly felt like a migraine. As soon as I crossed the threshold to leave the room, the pain stopped. How do I know it was male and a human? Simple. The woman who was renting the house and her family were sure it was her ex-husband. The story isn't as simple as the answer, though. Before I go into details, let me first say that I will not use names and locations in order to protect the client and her family. Privacy and confidence are the most important things we can offer someone when we are called to investigate a residence or business. We don't show up with NSPIR printed in bold letters across my little car. We don't talk to the neighbors unless the property owner asks them over to talk to us. We don't announce when or where we will investigate on social media or in any other way tip people off to the location or family name. It's nobody else's business. Now back to the story. One winter, not long after I joined the National Society of Paranormal Investigation and Research, NSPIR, our founder, George, asked if I was interested in a little drive out to the country to visit a home where activity had been taking place. Without any more knowledge than that, I agreed to go because that's how we worked most of the time. I am what some would call a sensitive intuitive and an empath. What that means is that I am able to pick up on little sensations that help me gain knowledge that I should not otherwise have access to. I occasionally just know things without the help of sensations, and I can physically feel the pain of others. After a childhood of being afraid of everything related to those moments and feelings, I learned to control them most of the time and use them to try to help others. George picked me up at the home on the appointed evening for our pre-investigation interview, and we headed out of Raleigh and away from the city lights. After several country roads and maybe a gravel driveway or two, we stopped in front of a cute little house beside a farm. My first notion was how small it seemed. and that it must be a quiet place so far from the city and its busy suburbs. For the most part, I was right. It was small. When the woman who called us for help answered the door, she let us inside and introduced us to her family. Of note was her daughter and her daughter's infant. George asked them not to tell me anything until we did our walkthrough. Our custom was to walk through the house, myself usually leading the way, unless the client wants to show us around, and George following, taking mental notes of my impressions. When we were finished with the walkthrough, we sat down with the client and let her fill us in on why she called us, what events had occurred, and why she thought they might be happening. And then we asked questions. Our questions ranged from, have you experienced other phenomena in your lifetime? To, is anyone in the house abusing drugs or taking prescription drugs that might cause hallucinations? We have to know what we're getting involved with as much as possible for our own safety and to learn how trustworthy our potential clients are. In this case, I hit on a few spots in the downstairs area where the energy felt different. When that happens, George would note these spots and sweep the room with a K2 meter to see if he can pick up any fluctuations in electromagnetic energy. This is not necessarily to pinpoint ghosts, as the TV shows would have you believe, but more to rule out my sensitivity to electricity. Sometimes close proximity to a big screen TV or an electrical box can give me similar sensations to what I feel in my back when a spirit is around, and we try to rule out the mundane first. There was only one room upstairs, and it was where the client slept. We walked up narrow steps that led directly into her low-ceilinged bedroom, and my head started hurting. I thought to myself, not now, as it was not a good time for a headache. Then I wondered if the room was giving me a funhouse feeling, with its not quite level floor and its tight confines. The longer George and I were in the room, the worse my head hurt, and I told him as much. I also told him I really didn't like the room at all, and I didn't want to stay up there much longer. He asked if I wanted to go ahead downstairs ahead of him, and I said, no, I'll stay. He swept the room with the K2 and found nothing unusual, so we left the room. As I stated before, the moment I crossed the threshold to leave and started down the stairs, my head stopped hurting. When we got back to the main floor, my head was fine. That was the first time I had ever had a reaction like that to the energy of a single room in a building. When we sat down with the client and her family members, they proceeded to fill me in as to why they wanted our help. I'll give you as much detail as I can without compromising their privacy, but know that there are a few facts I have to leave out in case anyone on the periphery of their lives might recognize the situation as theirs. The activities in the house were pretty common, if you can use that word with a haunting, for what many would call a poltergeist case. They would leave the house for a day with all the lights turned off and the doors locked, and arrive home to find all the lights on, the doors unlocked, and nobody there to account for it. They would hear footsteps in rooms that nobody was in. The TV and radios would turn on by themselves. The client would regularly have nightmares that demons were walking up those stairs to her bedroom to take her to hell, and one person in particular was leading them there. And the worst part was that scratches would appear on the infant after he slept in his crib alone all night, and they appeared in places he could not have scratched himself. The middle of his back, for example. When children are affected, the cases take on a stronger sense of urgency, as I'm sure any other paranormal investigator would agree. But even without children present, I don't believe that anyone should feel afraid in his or her own home. I've personally been afraid like that myself when I was younger, and it is a horrible feeling. George asked her if she had any idea who or what might have triggered the activity, and we were surprised when she answered in a very matter-of-fact manner, my ex-husband. Apparently, the two had a nasty breakup. There was domestic abuse involved, and when she left him and took her kids, she swore he would never find her to hurt her again. They moved as far away as they could get, and somehow he still found them. Her story was that he had started dabbling in darker occult practices, and claimed he could summon demons to help destroy her. Then one day, he was found hanging from a tree. That should have been the end of it, but for the family, it was the beginning of all the activity they described to George and me. We agreed that we would return with a team and our equipment to do a full overnight investigation of the house the following weekend. The night we returned, there were at least 5 NSPIR members and a few family members in the little home. We did an EVP, which stands for Electronic Voice Phenomenon, session in each room, asking questions of the spirit followed by long silences in the hopes of catching answers either with our own ears or on our digital voice recorders. At one point, we thought we were getting interaction with the K2 meters. We would ask questions and the meters would light up. We'd ask them again and they'd seem to respond again. We were in that pattern for probably 15 minutes when Derek, our most skeptical member, decided it was too predictable. We measured the seconds between answers and noted that they were about 30 seconds apart, even when we stopped asking questions. He took another member outside and walked around the house with the K2 meter and found the same regular hits but stronger near the HVAC system and electrical meter. The spikes were electrical in nature. Chalk that up to the mundane. There was actually some relief in realizing the meter was just doing what it was truly made to do, because the yes answers had been to increasingly frightening questions. Now you know why we stopped using K2 meters to do anything but look for electromagnetic fluctuations associated with appliances and high-tension lines. We had a few personal experiences that night, but nothing overly exciting. One new thing that we learned about the family was that at the request of the daughter, they had kept a box of the ex-husband's belongings, including the clothes he had been wearing when he hanged himself. My immediate reaction to the macabre discovery was get rid of it. I might have even told them to burn it. Nothing good would come from holding on to his things. In fact, it was possible that their keeping that box was keeping him there and allowing him the power he seemed to have over them. They asked if we could recommend someone to come out and physically cleanse the house, and we could. I know a lady I trust to handle those things, and if her help wasn't enough, I wasn't afraid to ask a priest for intervention of some type. One way or another, I wanted them to be able to sleep peacefully without horrifying nightmares and physical marks in their own beds. We left the home very early the next morning with hours of digital audio to listen to, hundreds of photos, and personal notes to pore over. Unfortunately, all of that data gave us very little solid evidence from a scientific perspective. What can I say? Spirits don't perform on command. Sometimes we get a lot, and sometimes we expect a lot and get nothing. George contacted the client to let her know that our data didn't produce any solid evidence and talked to her about setting up a time for our friend to go clear the house. She was hesitant, and as we usually did, George told her we would be here for her when she made up her mind. A few weeks later, George had been in contact with the client, and she told them they had moved. I asked him if she said whether they had gotten rid of that box, and he didn't think they had. I told him that the move would only be a temporary fix. The ex-husband's spirit would find them again because that box was like a homing beacon for him. A few months later, George heard from them again. Things were happening in the new house, similar to what had happened in the old one. I was not surprised and told him to offer to send our psychic friend over there to help. The family was afraid that that would somehow make things worse, which is something we hear a lot and is not founded on anything but fear. That was the last time we had contact with them. I can only hope that somehow they found peace. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, follow the link in the show notes to find my books. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season no matter what you celebrate. And if you don't celebrate anything, just have a wonderful month. If you are interested in sharing your own personal paranormal experiences, or if you have an idea for an episode topic, please reach out through the contact form at peeppodcast.com. That's PEEP podcast.com. Remember, that stands for People Experiencing Everyday Paranormal. While you're there, subscribe to my newsletter to keep up with the podcast and all my creative and energetic endeavors. I only email it once a month. You'll receive briefs on recent episodes, information on any upcoming appearances, and some additional fun stuff, including drawings for free books like the one I did last month. If you enjoy the podcast, please give it some rating love on your favorite podcast app, share it with friends, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Ratings and reviews help the podcast be found by others. A huge thank you to everyone who has given the show some love. I truly appreciate it. No matter how you support the show, listening, telling others about it, financial support through the donate button on the website, or any other way, I absolutely appreciate your being here. Thanks again for listening. Stay safe and be well.